So.
Yes, and he also has another popular talk that Cynthia is also interested in doing. It's the
10 most common mistakes good parents make.
Parents make. And so Dr. Maniacci is a clinical psychologist with practices in Naperville and Chicago, and he's a published author and frequently is a frequent speaker and consultant. So a warm welcome to Dr. Maniacci. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get the disgusting stuff over with. I am fully vaccinated. I will keep my distance. I would prefer to do this without the mask. If anyone is uncomfortable, of course I will put it on. What do you desire? What do you need? We're okay? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Gina. I mentioned, other than a consult I did with an engineering group where I had to come in and help them with some COVID that broke out and some fighting. This is the first time I've been in front of a group of people. Now, as a clinical guy, I've been having therapy sessions, but in 2 years, all of my workshops, the class I've been teaching have been virtual. So I thank you. This is both exciting, a little bittersweet, and I feel like I should be sitting here with no pants on. Don't go there. Don't encourage me. It's a horrible joke. Though, did you hear about the apostrophe and the comma who went into marriage counseling? The apostrophe was being too possessive and the comma didn't know when to stop. I'm a former English teacher. I love that joke. Leave me alone. All right. You here for birth order? Recording? I've learned the hard way. I will answer any question you have anytime. We don't have to wait till the end. Just raise a hand. But it is being archived somewhere. So you may want to be aware to keep the question anonymous, because these kids especially are much better at technology than we are, and they may find that you expose them forever on some tape somewhere. So just be aware that this is being recorded and posted where? YouTube. YouTube. Got it? So 10 years from now, your kid will hate you. For many reasons, not just this. How many of you have children? Yay! How many of you have children ages 0 to 5? 6 to 10? 11 and older? I'll get the whole spectrum, just double checking. I can do this very scientifically and very commonsensically. I'm going to do a little bit of a blend of both, okay? Stop me anytime. Besides being a psychologist, I'm also a professor. I do a lot of teaching. I keep up on this. As I was mentioning, there are over 200 studies on birth order that have found validity. I'll get into all of them if you want. And on average, someone did research about this. A new book is published about birth order every 3 years. So it's well researched, well documented. And I will go for about 15-20 minutes, then we'll hit a break in that you can tell me which direction you want to go in. We have two options. We can talk primarily children and the challenges they raise based upon birth order, or we can talk about parents and some of the challenges parents have based on their birth order raising the children. I can do a combination of both, but not in detail. Make sense? Also, people sooner or later want to ask, there's a ton of research about birth order and marriage. That is another whole workshop I do. I actually teach a class on this, on marriage therapy and birth order. So if you're ever interested, we'll get into that. And we'll talk badly about your spouses, especially the ones not here. Okay, first, I am a geek, so let me give you a quick science. There are two ways to define birth order. The right way and the wrong way. Let me tell you what the wrong way is. It's called ordinal position. They assign a number to the birth of the child. Firstborn, secondborn, third, fourth, fifth. Once you get past secondborns, there's no validity to it. We have no idea what a thirdborn looks like. We have no idea what a fifthborn looks like. It's very lazy but easy research to do. Because all you do is you list and then give all sorts of trait inventories. But sure enough, trust me, about 20 minutes from now, someone will raise a hand and say, I'm the fifth of six. What does that make me? And I'll say, a poor listener. Got it? The other way in which there have been 150 research studies, because some of the others are ordinal position, where they tend to find inconclusive results. Over about 150 of them use what's called psychological position. When birth order is discussed that way, it is amazingly valid. Psychological position does not talk about birth order in terms of number. It talks about the role the child adopts in the family. And there are only 5. Only children, oldest borns, second, middle, and youngest. Those are the 5 birth order positions. There are little confusing terminology. There are rules of ordination. I'm only going to cover 4 of them briefly now. The 4 rules about birth order are, first of all, age is important. This applies to children who are within 5 years, maybe 6, of each other. Once you start to get large groups, you'll have separate subgroups. Lisa and I were talking. I'm the youngest of 5. But my eldest sister is 20 years older than I am. My next sister, deceased, was 17 years older. My next sister, still alive, 10 years older. My brother, deceased, 9 years older. So I am the youngest of 5, but psychologically, I'm an only child with 4 mothers. All of them Italian. Worse, Sicilian. As I say, the people in my family of origin never suffered from mental illness. They enjoyed it. But you see, we don't have one family. There are really 3 separate groupings. There are 2, and then me. And we all grew up as if we were independent of each other. So if you tried to compare me to a 5th born where they were 2 years apart, we'd have nothing in common. You hear that? You'd have to interview the people and find out the particular circumstances. So you'll find I am mostly an only child, but I have a really nasty streak of youngest born, very playful, and I'm a brat. And I enjoy it. I just figured out a way to get paid for it. Got it? Next, gender can play a role. It depends on, this is the most technical phrase I will give you the entire workshop, the psychological differentiation of the parents. If they adopt traditional gender-based roles, then gender usually plays a part. So, for example, we have John, who's 7, and Mary, who's 8. Hello, sir. Thank you for having me tonight. In a traditional gender-differentiated family, do you understand? You probably have 2 oldest borns. John being the oldest born male, Mary being the oldest born female. Why? Because the parents will give clear senses that in order to find your place, you can do this. If they're traditionally gender defined, and dad works out of the house, mom works in the house. Dad has short hair, mom has long hair. Dad mows the yard, mom does the dishes. Dad plays sports, mom does art. Do you see? John and Mary can each succeed in separate domains without crossing over to each other. So they could both be oldest borns. The more homogeneous the parents become, undifferentiated. Dad's hair is likely to be as long as mom's. Both work in and out of the house. Dad's as likely to cook as mom is to play softball. You see what I'm saying? Mary is going to be as expected to help with the yard as John is to do the dishes or cooking. As sex role differentiation decreases, competition increases. Therefore, you're probably going to have an oldest and a second born with Mary and John. Make sense? So age is one factor. Gender is a second. Third, birth orders can and often do occur in blends. As I mentioned earlier, I am a blend, mostly of an only child, but you'll hear there's some youngest born traits. If we look at, we'll say again, John, 7 years old this time, Mary, 6 years old, and Billy, 5 years old. Don't be surprised if Mary is a blend of an only child and a middle. And that will largely depend on with whom she circulates. When she tends to be with boys, she may act like an only child. When she tends to be mixed company with girls, she'll probably act like a middleborn. I'll have more to say about that later. But you understand how people's roles shift depending on where they see themselves. Fourth rule, special conditions can alter birth order. Here's the most obvious, a handicapping condition. For example, Down syndrome. If your oldest born is born with Down syndrome, it is quite common for ordinally that child to be the firstborn, but psychologically that child to take the role of youngest born because of the developmental delays that often occur unless there's real intense early intervention. Whereas ordinally his brother may be number 2, but takes psychologically the role of oldest born because he matured faster. And you look to him more to do things. So even though psychologically he's an oldest born, ordinarily he's the second. So you see the research gets complicated when you take these factors into account. Sometimes it's not simply a handicapping condition which can alter birth order. It can be a special talent or a gift. I've had the good fortune of working with several professional athletes, including an Olympic athlete. One of them was a gymnast. She was never home. From the time she was 5, 6 years old, they knew she had talent. So during the time when the kids were normally home, where was she? Every holiday, every vacation, where was she? At a camp. So she was basically a middle child raised like an only child by herself. And they just worked around her. They almost saw her as a cousin. You know what I mean? She made the Olympics. She didn't really know her siblings. So those kinds of things can alter birth order. Now that I've said that, let me violate those rules and talk about them as if it's a monolith. One basic concept. Again, anytime stop me. Oh, for the tape. Let me give you 3 very simple but excellent books on this if you want to pursue. There are dozens of them. Here are the 3 best researched, most reliable, and easiest reads. It is on tape, so you don't have to write it down if you don't want to. The first easiest introduction is Kevin Lehman, L-E-M-A-N. He's from the University of Arizona. The book's called The Birth Order Book. Easy to find. It's in its 4th edition. He updates it every 10 years or so. It's a real good book. He is also a youngest born, so it's a joy to read. It's very funny. You got it? You want a more scholarly but digestible book, Walter Toman, T-O-M-A-N, The Family Constellation. Similar to Kevin Lehman's book, there are 4 editions of this. He updated it every 15 to 20 years. He followed a group of children from 4 and 5 years old until they were in their 70s. He just tracked them and how they turned out. And there were about 4,000, 3,000 in the study he tracked for all that time. And he found birth order's true. And it has long-lasting effects. Walter Toman, The Family Constellation. And then the most scholarly of the books, but if you can get through a couple of chapters on complex statistics, you'll like it. Frank Sulloway, S-U-L-L-O-W-A-Y, Born to Rebel. He's from MIT. It's a psychological study of mostly second-borns and youngest-borns. But you can't talk about a second-born without talking about oldest-borns, their enemies, the nemesis. Got it? Don't smile too widely. So there are others. Ask me, I'll give you others. But for now, let's start. I'm going to give you what is known as the modal, the most common occurring traits we find in the birth orders. Got it? Any questions thus far? Have a little fun. We'll start with the easiest. Only children. Any only children in here? No. Good, we can make fun of them. My running joke is, you can always tell only children the first day of kindergarten. They're the ones that show up carrying a briefcase. The unique thing about only children is they have no clue they're children. The central theme which describes only children, the organizing principle upon which their personality is based, is perfectionism. See, children know they're children when they have peers to compare themselves to. Only children don't compare themselves for the first crucial 3, 4, 5 years to other children. They compare themselves to parents. And they don't know that's not fair. And they make a common mistake cognitively. They confuse age differentiation with skill differentiation. They are not less skilled than the adults. They are younger. They're not measuring the adults when the adults were their age. You hear what I'm saying? That's an appropriate skill measure. So a 3-year-old will measure herself against a mom who's 20 years older, 25 years older, and not realize it's an age difference. So what we find is, in the research, only children tend to set their goals the highest of all the birth order positions. Hence the perfectionism. Second factor that comes in, only children get to arrange their world the way they want, and nobody comes in and touches it. Remember I said, I'm mostly an only child. The nearest sibling to me was 9.5 years older, but there was a problem. That was still young enough for every now he'd come in again and mess up my stuff. One day, just for fun, he took the models I had been building, you know, model ships, model planes, lined them up in the backyard and shot them all with BB guns to practice. And when I went to my mother, she said, "You know your brother," and did that gesture, which is a nice Italian gesture. And I went in, cried, tried to rebuild them. Welcome to the hell called me. Make sense? So that's why sometimes I'm not quite an only child. He would invade my territory. But for true only children, they arrange papers and things on their desk. They go to school, they come back, and they're what? Hence, I can control the world. It's perfectly normal to believe that when I arrange things, they should stay that way. Do you have any only children as spouses or friends or kids?
My husband is.
You want to drive him nuts? Go home and touch his stuff. He will perspire. If you have a friend who's an only child and you're looking at a vase, you say, "May I touch that?" Yes. Put it back 1 millimeter off. The person will sweat until she can move it back in space. You hear what I'm saying? You saw it. I wasn't aware of it. I grabbed my mask. You said I don't need it. I had to put it exactly back. I just couldn't stuff it in my pocket. You know what I mean? So that creates a sense of perfection. Third, many only children are often first grandchildren. And they get the sense that the eyes of the world are upon them. And they are. So they grow up very self-conscious, knowing that everything I do is being what? So they have the sense that I better get it right. Everything tucked in, zipped up, all this. You combine those factors, voila, an only child. Only children are really excellent at vocabulary. They have the highest number of words on tests of vocabularies of any of the birth order positions, but they speak the fewest. They tend to talk the least. Most of that dialogue is happening where? In their heads. Because that's how they play it out. They have a wonderful imaginary world. They are overrepresented by far on Academy Award-winning actors and actresses. They're used to role-playing. They're used to an audience. They're excellent at their craft. Perfectionism. You hear this? But my daughter, my wife, she hates all of us. She loves us, but she hates us. She's a middle child and a twin. I'll talk to you about that later. I'm an only child, basically. Our daughter's an only child. We have 2 cats, both only cats, because one's a male, one's a female. And they're brother and sister, but they don't like each other. And she says, how was I raised in a family with only children? And my daughter had imaginary friends. And I'd hear her talking to them. And that was her dialogue. And when she realized she was listening, all the dialogue went internal. The difference between my daughter and me is I had a ton of imaginary friends, but they wouldn't play with me. They didn't like me. So you understand again a little of my childhood. And last factor about only children. Only children tend to be exceptionally excellent problem solvers. But they won't communicate that. We're going to talk about oldest borns next. You will see a very big difference about that. So don't be surprised if the only child is solving problems where? And will present you the finished results. So if you say, what were you thinking? You'll get silence from an only child. Because what is your husband doing? Formulating his response to make sure it's grammatically perfect, well thought out, and then he will share it with you. He's not slow. He's not evading. He has to sort everything out before he shares it. As opposed to oldest borns. Where are my firstborns? Raise your hand. Oh my God, how rare. You know oldest borns because they were voted most likely to carry their own caskets to the grave. Ask me why. So they would get it right. The central theme that organizes the personalities of oldest borns is control. That is different than perfectionism. You see, oldest borns are what known as active controllers. In the research literature, only children are known as passive controllers. That's another way of saying perfectionism. See, a passive controller does not want to tell anybody what to do, but do not tell the passive controller what to do. So I don't want to control you, but you better not. Oldest borns, they want to tell other people what to do. They live for that. Okay? It gives them all sorts of joys we will not ever understand on this planet if we're not oldest borns. You see, oldest borns grow up in a home where this is a common dynamic. Imagine this. It's a Saturday morning, you're doing something in the kitchen, you hear a crash in the living room where your kids are playing. You go in there, whose name do you call out first? The oldest born. Billy, Joey, Bobby. Whose name got called first? He's the oldest born. And he'll say, why are you calling on me? What do you say to him? And then he'll fall. What does that matter?
You know better.
Almost, you left the word out. You should know better. You have just should all over that child. Oldest borns get should upon all the time. And they grow up shoulding on themselves. They suffer from what I call masturbation. I must do this, I must do that. Oldest borns grow up hearing shoulds and thinking, if anybody else does it and messes up, I'm going to get what? So let me do it. I'm more coordinated than that useless hunk of protoplasm called my brother. And if he does it, it'll what? Get goofed up, and I will get called out first, and I'll have to delay. So just let me do it. At which the others go, yay. I'll talk more about that later. So oldest borns grow up with process mentality, as opposed to an only child who wants to sort it out in his head. The oldest born, feeling pressure to get things done, how quickly? Quickly, get things in order, will often begin to talk in process of thinking, not quite sure where the sentence may end. Being a professor, being a psychologist, that's a handicap sometimes. You should know where you're going when you start talking. Most oldest ones say, I don't care, I'll get somewhere. It'll come out. They have faith in themselves. This desire to control will lead them to be very responsible, very orderly, very successful at a cost. 5 studies have been done about this. How many? Most likely to suffer cardiovascular illness. Most likely to suffer stress-related illnesses. Most likely to be depressed. Because what do most oldest born feel? The weight of the world on them. The cost of being so successful, being first, highest achievement rate, oldest born. Most likely to be a math or science major, oldest born. Most likely to be President of the United States, overwhelmingly, over 94%, oldest borns. Most likely to be CEO, oldest born. Own your own business, oldest born. 4-star general, shall I keep going? Admiral in the Navy. Do you hear all the success? Tenured professor. They have a lot of success at a high cost. It comes with the turf. Compare oldest borns with their nemesis. Cain and Abel, second borns. My mentor used to say you can usually tell the birth order of the child by looking at the way the parents carry it. Oldest borns like this in a basket, nice, safe, and secure. See that? Second borns, they carried like laundry on the hip. Don't even ask about youngest borns. We're the ones on the leash being dragged through the mall. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But second borns grow up never knowing what it's like to not have a pace setter. Only children and oldest born know what it's like to be alone. They call it paradise. My wife is a second born, but she's the eldest twin. And she has that curious blend of oldest and second born. And to this day, she still looks at her twin and says, don't forget, I'm 6.5 minutes older than you. To which her twin says, lovingly, yeah, it's because I pushed you out. I wanted some time alone. It was the sweetest 6.5 minutes of my life. My mentor, I'll mention him again, long deceased, he died at the young age of 97, 5 years ago. And he was working until the week he died. Brilliant man. He coined the phrase, which is in the Encyclopedia of Psychology, Teeter-Totter Effect. In the old days, remember when there were things on the playground to play on? Back when there used to be diving boards, things like that. And we used to send kids out and say, come back when you're hungry or bleeding. The teeter-totter is a board on a fulcrum where one goes up, the other goes down. The teeter-totter effect takes place with the second born. The second born will try and do everything the oldest born does. And if he succeeds at it, the phrase is called, exactly, I'm not kidding, dethronement. He takes the king off his throne. He assumes that position. He usurps. If they're born like twins, or my sister and brother, who are 11 months apart, you know what I'm saying? It's possible for the second born to what? Catch, because they're so close, especially if the second born is a girl, because they tend to develop faster. They hit puberty earlier. As you start getting near the edge of birth order factors, that 5-year mark, 3 years are hard to catch up, even if you're a genius. So if you have Bill, who's a math student And Bob, who's a math genius, he might skip 1 year, he might skip 2. He's not going to skip. So the second born will go out of his way to catch the oldest born until he realizes you have too much of a head start. So then he begins this game. Where you succeed, I'll ignore. And where you ignore, I'll succeed. And the Teeter-Totter Effect begins. They have the same gene pool, usually, unless there's adoption and things. They have the same environment, the same nutrition. They will go out of their way to suppress their genetic and biological similarities because of competition. My wife and her twin, they never tested. They could be identical. They look so much alike. They could not be more different than night and day. My wife was a dancer in the theater, star of the play. You hear this? Long hair, beauty queen. Her twin, Division I volleyball player. Short hair, wanted nothing to do with the arts. They each go their separate ways. Twins, a professor down in Texas. My wife's a psychologist up here in Illinois. Yes, roll your eyes. 2 psychologists. My joke is we never save for our daughter's college, we save for her therapy. And all of a sudden, my wife gets into athletics, starts training for a half marathon. Her twin starts letting her hair grow, getting glam. You hear this? Because they now allow their biological proclivities to shine, because they're apart and established. But she spent most of the Christmas break with us. It started within 2 days. They started hairs up, and my wife is glamming, and then, you know what I'm saying? Competition. So here's a common thing we find. Most likely, I said, to be a math or science major, oldest born. Who's most likely to be an athlete? Second born. See, I got to take a territory. They both have the same fast twitch muscles, both have the same biological tendency, both may have proclivity towards math, but they'll go out of their way. If your firstborn's academic, your secondborn's going to look at him and say, what does he not do well at? That's where I'm going to put it. If your firstborn's spending all his time studying, secondborn will be exquisitely social. If your firstborn is an all-around everything, your secondborn is my client. I've got no territory, so I'm going to be the troubled one. You hear that? Because you're super what? Good. Hence the title of Sulliway's study, Born to Rebel. He studied secondborns throughout history. He's at MIT. He teaches the philosophy of science and the history of science. And he began doing profiles of these major scientists. And he discovered through a poll who were the scientific revolutionaries in your field, who disrupted the entire field and took it in a new direction. 92% of them were secondborns. And then he expanded it to economics, politics, to look at revolutionaries. Over 88% of them were secondborns. They just look for what has to be done differently. So my description is oldestborns come into the world and they created the world. Yes. Let me take it on. I'll do it so I know it's done. Right. Secondborns invented the word. No. Research studies have shown of all the birth order positions, they tend to have amongst, despite being athletes, the slowest reaction times. Can you see why? They have to wait till a consensus is reached so they can take the opposite stand to say no. You all decide, where are we going for lunch? McDonald's, McDonald's, McDonald's. Okay, it's on McDonald's. Then the second one goes, Burger King. Just to prove I'm what? You want to drive a second-born crazy? Ask her first. Watch her stumble. I don't know. Ask him first. Look at them smile up here. Second-born?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
How much does all this change if you have a lot of kids?
You only have a lot of kids from the parents' perspective. From the child's perspective, they subgroup based on age. You hear what I'm saying? So it may be your fourth child, but from that child's point of view, I may be the oldest of the last group. Remember I said it's the role the child adopts. And then you'll find, I don't count them. They're too old. They weren't around. So you have to ask the kid and look for these traits I'm talking about. Got it? Let's talk about, who's most likely to experience disruptive behaviors in classrooms? Second-borns. You see that? The authority. A study was done at the University of Kansas to look at teacher-pupil conflict. And the best predictor of it was birth order. The overwhelming majority of teachers are what birth order? Oldest borns. And if they want to run a classroom like that, who's going to pick on them? Second-borns go, I've been preparing for you my whole life. Let's go to town. Everyone sit down. You know what I'm saying? I do a lot of consulting to schools, and I say, if you got a second-born, you got to win them over. Be careful you don't come across too much as an authority figure. We'll get into that another time. If oldest-borns invented the word yes, and second-borns invented the word, middle children invented the word why? The central theme for middle children is pleasing, diplomacy, negotiation. The overwhelming majority of United Nations diplomats are middle children. The overwhelming majority of hostage negotiators are middle children. Human resource people, middle children. You don't want an oldest born as a hostage negotiator. He'll show up and go, let him out, damn it! Bang, hostages are dead. You don't want a second born. He'll come in and go, yeah, stick it to the man. You hear? Middle children don't grow up with the rights and privileges of the oldest born or the pampering and attention of the youngest born. And that's not fair. You have 3 kids. You're cutting banana slices up in the cereal. It's your middle child who will count the number of slices, just to make sure everybody's what? Even. They want life to be fair. Of all the birth order positions, they're consistently the most social. Most likely to be bi or trilingual, multilingual. They're used to what? Most likely to practice the creative arts. That doesn't mean they're not good at math. Doesn't mean they're not good at athletes. But they're drawn towards the gray. See, oldest borns like the math and science because it's clearly right or wrong, black or white. That gives them little psychological orgasms. I apologize, sir, I couldn't resist. You hear that? Middle children don't want anyone to feel bad. So they like everyone to have opinions. So the arts tend to lend itself more towards that. And you'll find they're more musical, more artistically inclined. Does that mean an oldest born can't be an artist? Of course not. But I'll bet my right arm he's a cubist, a pointillist. Very precise. You hear that? I doubt any of the impressionists were oldest borns. It's just too fuzzy, too vague. I doubt Jackson Pollock was an oldest born. You hear that? He just strikes me as a second born or a youngest born. Just throwing stuff all over the place and getting paid for it. Next thing unique about middle children. This was a very sad but bittersweet study. They take a large group of people and they put them in a hall and they observe them from behind a mirror. And they count in detail how many people are talked to by whom. So Gina comes in and Gina has a name tag on. There's someone assigned to watch Gina and count how many different people she talks to and how much time she spends with each person. And they study this for everybody in the group. After the event is over, they give them questionnaires to fill out and say, who do you think was the most social, the most polite? They then did this study. Middle children have the most contact with the most people of anybody in the birth order position. And they are consistently rated by others as the sweetest, the nicest, the most social. And when they rate themselves as the least capable socially. They were bothering people. They don't feel good about it. Isn't that fascinating? Yet, by objective measures, they talk to more people, and they're rated by those people as being kind, sweet, social, but they don't feel it because they're measuring themselves constantly, and they're always falling short. Middle children have the most number of friends of anybody in the birth order position. And Kevin Leman has the beautiful theory why. It's as if they're not sure where they fit in the family, so they want to go out and be with and try and find a role outside the family. And last, very quickly, the best birth order position, youngest born. Raise your hand. Yay! I will forever and always not be Michael in my family. I am known as Mikey. It's called the diminutive. I told you I used to be an English teacher. The diminutive. In English, they had an IE or a Y at the end of the name. In Spanish, any Spanish speakers? Ito or Ita, I-T-O-I-D. It's the diminutive. The book I talk about this in, I wrote back in 1999, was translated into a number of different languages. The Japanese translator contacted me and says, we do the exact same thing in Japanese. We have a diminutive we attach to youngest borns. So you see, cultures have told me this, that this happens in other cultures. You see, the youngest borns are in an interesting position. At one moment you look at them and say, oh, this is our last one. Do you hear the bittersweet? And at the same time you look at them and go, ooh, this is our last one. Who tends to raise youngest borns? The other siblings. And there are objective measures of this. Let me give you one that a classmate of mine, back when pterodactyls flew the sky, she did this study back in the early 80s. Ready? She collected family photo albums at supermarkets, at churches, and counted the number of photos per child and then correlated that with birth order. Who has the highest number of photos? A ton. Who is the least photographed? Youngest borns, consistently. Been there, done that. We don't need to take the camera out. The oldest born blinks, you're taking a picture. He rolls over, you're taking a picture. The youngest born has to be standing on his head juggling a cat on fire. And maybe then you'll be like, oh, stop it. So youngest borns, the central theme for them is attention, service, entertainment. What the oldest born got simply for breathing, the youngest born has to work for, earn. Because you've seen that. How many times are you going to see the same movie? Well, if you have 3, 4 kids, I know what this script is. The youngest born goes, oh yeah? You haven't seen this. And that's how he gets acknowledgement. Makes sense? How much power, relatively with size, do youngest borns have compared to the siblings? Not a lot. So they've got to cultivate charm, humor, to stop from getting the daylights beat out of them. If you're going to be precocious, mischievous, a little devilish, and you're going to get caught, you better have a smile. You better know how to charm. You hear that? So youngest borns cultivate the humor, the playfulness, the charm. Hi. No, it's okay. Now we can talk about him. Make sense? So, interesting bit of study. Central theme, only children, perfectionism. Oldest born, control. Second borns, independence, rebelliousness. Middle children, diplomacy, pleasing. Youngest born, attention, playfulness. But of all the birth order positions, 3 separate studies have been done on this. Guess which birth order position has the highest self-esteem? 3 studies have been done about this. Youngest and oldest. They keep tying for highest self-esteem. It is the most common marriage in the United States, oldest and youngest, overwhelmingly. I said I teach classes on this. Besides being a psychologist, I'm a marriage and family therapist and a neuropsychologist. Yes, I had no social life. You hear? Why do they tend to tie on self-esteem? No one knows. Here's the theory. It's a nice Saturday morning. Remember, you're in the kitchen working, but you got to get out of the house. John's your oldest boy. Billy is your youngest boy. He's upstairs. You got to get a house. You say, John, will you make sure Billy's ready? As John is walking up the stairs, is he going to use good parenting techniques? Because if he lets Billy experience the consequences of his choices, he's going to come down with the shoes on the wrong feet, the shirt misbuttoned, and John gets yelled at, right? So John thinks, again, that useless hunk of protoplasm, I better take care of him. How could this family survive? And his self-esteem goes up. What no one realizes is Billy is up in his room going, watch what I can make him do. Billy doesn't have a brother, he has a valet. His self-esteem is going up when he thinks, look at how many people are here to service me, take care of me. So his self-esteem goes up because he feels he's got the most control in the family by being the least capable. Hence the marriage. The overwhelming, most common marriage in the United States, oldest and youngest borns. They've been training for that. He brings to the marriage, let's pretend he's the oldest born, responsibility, stability. She brings to the marriage, if she's the youngest born, excitement, fun, playfulness, and they do well. And 7 years into the marriage, she's complaining that he's too controlling, a stick in the mud, and the husband's complaining she's flighty, she's not serious, she never gets stuff done. Neither one has changed. You hear that? They've just gotten locked into a pattern. Those are the basic positions. Any questions? Yes?
What if it was like 3 kids, the second born is going over in the middle? Where do they have to choose?
Age difference?
My kids are 2 years and it's like 2 years.
Oh, so they're tight packed. Gender?
All boys.
All boys. My condolences. Here, on second thought, just give me a call tomorrow. I'll save an extra slot for you. Basically, what's going to happen is, depending on a couple of factors we don't have time to get into, you're probably going to have a middleborn with a little bit of a rebellious streak. Yeah, you can hear it. Does it make sense now? He wants to be pleasing, he wants to be diplomatic, but one comment too many, and then he's going to make me. You hear that? And he knows how to push that oldest born's buttons. And how old are they?
5, 4, right now.
Right. So yeah, and the 5-year-old still hasn't caught on that he's being played. Hopefully by the time he's 10, 11, he'll catch on. Oh, I get it. If not, the second one's going to be like, go, I got him. You know what I mean? Another question? Okay, we're at the fork. We got about 15, 20 minutes. You want to go specifically from the kids, parenting techniques, or if you are a parent of this birth order or your spouse, what seems to be the parenting challenges you run into. Or I can do both, just in less depth. What would you prefer, guys? Throw some stuff out. One vote for kids. Okay. Now, something to keep in mind. I've been doing this 41 years. I've been in practice. Maybe someday I'll get it right. There are many factors. Technically, there are 11, which make us who we are. 11 factors that need to be understood in order to understand personality. The factor with the largest variance explains the most is birth order. Because when you look at twin studies, genes are important when they're not raised together. Twins raised apart are significantly alike until you put them in the same house. Then they go out of their way. You see the factor? Now, what we find is genes are important, but birth order is the single most important factor in childhood. One that once you're pregnant, you have no control over. Why? Because not only can They, once they're past 4 or 5 years old, start to make a decision to suppress their tendencies. But what about parents? What role they play? You got to understand, you don't give up your birth order position once you become a parent. And it is very different how an oldest born parent versus a second born versus a middle versus a youngest born. So what often appears as a parenting difference is really what's called a transgenerational birth order effect. And the children catch this and know how to play it. So I will talk about the birth order of the children, but you understand it is a dyad, it is interactive. Let me give you an example. University of Arizona. The child you are most likely to have difficulty with occupies the same birth order position as you. You're competing in the same role. If you're an oldest born, which kid's going to push your buttons sooner or later? Because what is he doing? Tell me, Michael, eat your dinner. Say it to me.
Michael, eat your dinner.
Really? No. We're fighting for what?
Control.
That's not a second born response. That's an oldest born saying, don't. See, your youngest born, you cut the meat up and he's happy. Oldest born, you cut the meat up, he throws it back at you. Because I want to do it. That's not a second born response. Make sense? So you've got to understand the dynamics. That explains about 70 to 75% of the variance. In about 20 to 25, 30% of the cases, it's not the same birth order as you. It's the sibling you had difficulty with when you were a child who will push your buttons. Hypothetical. Let's pretend I'm an oldest born. And my middle born sister drove me crazy, and we never worked it out. When I become a parent, if I have a middle born, do you see how that child may tap into the issues I never resolved with my siblings, especially if that child is what gender? You see that? Then, of course, I won't understand it, but I'll find these phrases on my lips. You got your aunt's genes. And it's certainly possible. Yes, that's 1 degree of separation. It's possible. But you see the role. She's a middle child and a female. I didn't work it out with my middle child sister, so I'm going to be quicker to hop on her, and she'll feel it. And she'll badger me, go after me, just like my sister did. And know the buttons, because they're both middle children. Make sense? So you've got to be aware that when you parent your kids, a little bit of your birth order may be sneaking out. And how they're relating to their siblings is rehearsal for how they'll relate to you. Now, why is birth order such an important factor? That's why. They spend more time with their siblings than they do with parents. Of course, anything you spend a lot of time on is going to influence you, even with daycare, yes. If sibling relationships is the dominant factor in child rearing, guess what the second most dominant factor is? Peer relationships. More than parents. Because they spend what? Between day school, kindergarten, you hear this? Social. Freud was wrong. It's not the parent-child relationship which is dominant. And when parents do interact, again, birth order effects. This is Alfred Adler's research theory back in the 1910s, 1920s. His first article about this was in 1918. That he wrote about this called The Education of Children, where he started pointing this out. So you see, an only child, the key thing you have to do with an only child is give her space. Let her be slow. Remember, they're not slow. They need to get it perfect, so they've got to be careful. Next, only children do really not care about social. There are some other factors I don't have time to get into, but by and large, the biggest conflict you're going to have with your only child, besides crowding, touching that person's domain, is you're going to push that child to be more social than he or she wants to be. Only children are comfortable with people at what? But we want them to be, they don't want to be. They like having people where? Besides, you're going to spill your snot on my stuff. Stay over there. back, spawn of Satan. Got it? Give them space, allow them to be slow, and very key, be careful of their perfectionistic strivings. They'll never live up to their own standards, guys. And we've got to be careful if we praise them too much about achievement. You got to teach them that it's okay, you ready? This is a curse in the western suburbs, to be average. That's not a four-letter word, you can say it. Only children are so perfectionistic. Arrgh. Oldest borns. You have to teach them the difference between being a bully and being a leader. They don't get it. They don't know. But you're not going to break the oldest born spirit. That kid's going to lead. And if you have subgroups, you might have 2 or 3 of them. You hear? Or if it's gender-based, you might have the oldest born male, the oldest born female. Don't take the power from them. They've got to have it. You're not going to win. The more you try and take it from them, the more they're going to what? Cling to it. This one is hard for many parents to hear. They deserve more privileges than the others because they almost always have more responsibilities. What fries oldest borns, they come in and tell me all the time. 4 or 5-year-olds tell me this. Never mind 12, 13-year-olds. Why don't we all have the same bedtime? I do twice as much. And I certainly understand most parents have the same bedtime for kids so they don't kill the children and eat them. And I applaud that. I hear you. But give a half hour extra. You hear what I'm saying? Give them a little more leeway so they don't feel life is unjust, unfair. They do more. They take it on. You don't know. They do. Let them have a little more privileges. And when the second one complains, don't try and please him. You can't. But just say, when you're that age, you will have those privileges too. Yes, but then he'll have more. And he laid the cards on the table. It's about wanting to usurp, catch. It's not about. And you can look at the second born and say, I can't undo it, sweetie. I'm sorry. Next time I'll have you first, I promise. Until then, what do you want me to do? He came out first. I'm sorry. You hear? And last, with oldest borns. This is a hard one, okay? Oldest borns, unlike only who are perfectionists, will have no problem not doing well at certain things if it preserves their leadership role. Whereas many only children will want to be perfect in anything they do, and oldest born usually will not care if he's athletic or not, if he's really got his niche in academics. If he's really a good math student, he really may not care about English. Because I found it. I'm a leader in that. I don't have to be perfect in everything. You know what I mean? So be careful. They will differentiate what they want to succeed in and what they don't. Second borns, you tend to, if you can imagine this, you see the black border around the white? That's the key thing for parenting second borns. Only define the boundaries. Here's a great way to approach a second born. We love music. We'd love you to try an instrument. What instrument? How long you practice? When you can quit? We'll leave up to you. So you define the boundaries, which is appropriate. You're the parent. But if you say, you will practice the violin 3 hours a day, second born will go, yes. Only child will go, I mastered it already. I want piano lessons. Youngest born will go, what? I wasn't listening. Middle child will say, yes. How deeply may I bow? Second born will say, bite me. If you want to impose your values upon a second born, broadly define it and give them freedom of movement within it. Here's the biggest one I get, church. Your oldest born will say, yes, I'll be in church. Second born will go, why? Say, we expect you to go, but how long you go, how you participate, when you have the right to say no, that's open to negotiation. Second born will hear that. You'll now be able to have a dialogue. But if you come across like this, It's not church any more than it is vacuuming, any more than it is laundry. The second born is not listening for the content. He's listening for the delivery. If you're coming across too authoritative, you're in his ballpark. He's going to challenge you. You hear? Just to say, no. Middle children. Do not step into a trap, which is very common. Ready? Can you look at me and say, it's not fair? You're my middle child. Say it to me.
It's not fair.
I know, sweetie, it is. Let me explain why. You're gone. You are no longer listening. And now you're going to say, not even my own father gets me. Say it again. That's not fair. Don't try and convince the middle-born that it's fair. Here's what you say. Say it to me.
It's not fair.
I know, sweetie. I know. And I'm sorry. But they were purchases, not leases or rentals. I can't turn them back. You're right, it's not fair. What do you think would help with that? That. Boom. You hear that? The diplomatic response. Let them know, I know it's not fair. Nobody in this family likes me. Say that.
Nobody in this family likes me.
I know, I don't either. No, that was a joke. Calm down, I'm a youngest born. I give my wife heart attacks all the time when my daughter would talk because I go for the joke. You know? But, see, she laughs. Look at her laugh. But nobody likes me. Say that again.
Again, okay. Nobody likes me.
I know, sweetie, and it does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it? I don't blame you. I can see how others talk to you. Do you hear that? Don't take the stand. Don't try and talk her out of it. Empathize with her claims of unfairness. Boom. But at least one person in the family, you've hooked her in. Gets me. If that child feels understood and connected, you'll get compliance. And allow that middle child to leave. That kid's going to want to bring children over to play with. Take children, friends with them on trips. Because that they define as their family members, not their siblings. You're nodding, you know.
Yeah.
And let it happen. Let that child spend a lot of time out. Obviously, of course, people check in, but that is where the kid will feel understood and validated in the social world. Not at home where it feels like I don't fit in. And last but not least, youngest borns. Give them everything they want all the time. I'm sorry, no. That is my loyalty oath to youngest borns. I have to say that. There are 4 key factors. I'm only going to hit 2 of them right now. I'll just mention the others later. Number 1, do not let the other children raise him. Let them help, let them assist, but not raise him. They won't have good parenting skills, and he'll milk it for all it's worth. He'll use them. You hear that? So, here's the way you help an oldest born with the youngest born. It's Johnny's night to set the table. You can look at Bill and say, will you make sure the table is set? Do you hear the difference between that and will you make sure Billy is setting the table? That gives him permission to go and try and control Billy. Upon which Billy will drop everything, mess things up to get his brother to do it. So you ask, remember I said leader versus boss? Teach him to supervise tasks, not the other children. And to come to you if there's a problem, not to handle it herself. Otherwise you get that dynamic. Second, teach the youngest born to be entertaining and charming, not bratty and annoying. He won't know the difference. You have to teach it to him. When is it funny versus when is it crude? When is it entertaining versus annoying? And much of that will be experience-based. You're going to have to wait to teach him at that moment, that joke really wasn't good for Grandma. Her teeth fell into the soup. Can we rehearse other jokes you can tell Grandma? But to say, don't tell jokes, you lost the youngest born. Make sense? What did the fish say when it swam into the wall? Damn. Come on, that's a cute joke. Get it? That's a nice joke for a youngest born to tell. What do you call a cow with no legs? Ground beef. What do you call a cow with 2 legs? Lean beef. What do you call a dog with no legs? Anything you want, he won't come anyway. Don't, it's a horrible joke. But remember, the central theme, entertainment, excitement, playfulness, most likely to experience school failure, youngest borns. Most likely to be voted class clown, youngest borns. Can you see the correlation? Most likely to be Fortune 500 successful salesperson, youngest borns. So they're going to be entertaining, they're going to be charming, they're going to be funny, but very few youngest borns are going to be valedictorians. Again, they might be. I've got to know the dynamics. If the oldest born went in a particular way and the second born went, that may leave the territory for the youngest born also to be intellectual. You've got to see the relationships and how dynamic and fluid they are. I had it very fortunate. My brother, who was the nearest to me, to put it in scientific terms, was a mess up. So it was easy to be successful. To give you a context, of the 7 of us in my family of origin, that's counting both parents, I'm the only one to graduate high school. Never mind college, master's degree, doctorate. It was easy as a youngest born to appear like a little bit of an only and the oldest because they made it clear that no one took that territory, so I could do it. But my brother held the record at the time for the 220 in New York State. He was a hell of an athlete. Do you see what that puts on me? It's tough to go into athletics. You know, he's going to national competitions, and then he quit school. So it was real hard for me to get into athletics. He was a sprinter, so when I did, I was a cross-country runner. You hear? You're going to be fast. I'm going to go long. Just to show I don't want to. Encourage them to be entertaining, and don't pamper them. What's the definition of pampering? I'll objectify it for you. Ready? Doing anything for children they're capable of doing for themselves. Neglect. Not doing for children what they're not capable of doing for themselves. The safest thing you can do with youngest borns. All of you, ready? Raise your left hands. Come on. And now do this. Remember the movie Shrek? His advice to Donkey, shut up. Back off. Let the youngest struggle. Grab the oldest, say, no, he's got it. Watch. Compare the youngest to others. See, are other kids his age and his capabilities capable of doing that? Then I need to what? And let him learn from experience. It'll be slower. Most likely to be diagnosed erroneously with a learning disability. Guess which birth order? Youngest borns. I'll do the neuropsychological testing. There's nothing there. The kid just like, I don't do homework. My sister does it for me. You expect me to do it? Don't help him too much with homework. You hear that? Let the teacher know. He's not doing it. Go on. You're not being a bad parent. You're just not stepping into a trap of doing it for the youngest. How are we doing? Any more questions? One more thing in general. This is going to drive you crazy, except there are no oldest borns in here, so you'll get it. You don't control this. I can't tell you how many families I work with. How many? And I tell them, a lot of what you're seeing in misbehavior isn't a parenting issue. It's not the way you raise the kid. It's really the interaction the siblings had with each other and then what he learned from his peers who refined those skills. Yes, this has been studied in classrooms and preschools. They group in their social life on birth order. See, what appears to be a peer interaction is another manifestation of birth order dynamics. And they will mirror in the classroom and on the playground. They'll gravitate towards the sibling birth order that they got along with. If I got along with my middle born, I'll spot the middle born on the playground and we'll get along. So it looked like Joe was my friend. Joe was really an extension of the sibling I got along with. So the birth order effects are still controlling social gatherings. So We don't do much with this. Yes, I said there are 11 factors. I'll talk to you about what parents do control another time, what they don't control, and yes, take responsibility for that. But if you think you're going to control the way the siblings interact with each other, no, you're not. Birth order seems to be a cross-cultural factor. Oldest borns are more alike cross-culturally than you are to any sibling in your own family. When we look at oldest borns in Ghana, that's where it was studied, Guangzhou, China, and New York, they're amazingly similar, despite cultural differences. And oldest borns, cross-cultural, have more in common with each other than they do with their own siblings. It's not language bound. Almost all cultures value who first? Oldest. Some second-borns don't exist in some cultures the way they do here. I'll get into that. No, that's a man from Emory University who's done this research. His name is Melvin Connor. They still have second-borns, but it's very different in some of these other cultures. What is considered rebellious there, we wouldn't define as rebellious here. Like not, handling the cow the right way or something seriously. That was one thing he studied. But it exists cross-culturally. Let yourself off the hook. There are things you can control. But remember what I said? Once you're pregnant, no. And last, remember, in another book I wrote, I opened one of the chapters with this joke. You got to remember this, guys, okay? To let yourself off the hook. There are two brothers, a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they decide today is the day they're going to learn how to swear. Don't panic, I keep it clean. And the 6-year-old says, I got it, I'm going to say the word damn, and he giggles. And the 5-year-old says, oh, I got it, I'm going to say the word ass, and he giggles. And just then, Mom yells, come on down for breakfast, kids. They run down the hall, jump up on their stools, stare at Mom with innocent faces. Mom looks at the 6-year-old and says, good morning, what would you like for breakfast? And all bright and smiley, the 6-year-old says, good morning, give me some Cheerios, damn it. And without skipping a beat, she smacks him in the mouth. He cries, falls off his stool, runs down the hall, slams his bedroom door in a huff. She looks at the 5-year-old and says, and what would you like for breakfast? And the 5-year-old says, I don't know, but you bet your ass it won't be Cheerios. What message was Mother intending to send? Don't. What did the 5-year-old hear? Don't ask for Cheerios. I've been doing this 41 years. You can't understand how often this happens, that the message you send is not, I'm sitting in my office and the mom will look at the son and say, did you get your homework done? And the kid gets all in a huff. I separate them, have them go in another room. I say, Mom, why did you do that? What did you mean? She says, look, I know we're under a lot of pressure. I rushed to get him here. I just want to make sure he's not too pressured and that he's okay. I bring the kid in and I say, what did your mother say? She doesn't trust me. She thinks I'm lazy. You hear that? Birth order is one of the ways to understand that what you're saying may not be what they're hearing. The only child's going to hear, I'm not perfect. The oldest born's going to hear, you're challenging my control. Second born's going to hear, you're trying to make me. The middle child's going to hear, it's not fair, you don't like me. And the youngest born's going to hear, I need more attention. I don't care what you're saying. You're noticing me. You could be screaming at me. You could be giving me ice cream. It's all the same. I got the attention. Remember Charlie Brown? The parents, wah, 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 wah. That's all the youngest born hears. It's the wah, wah, wah's coming at me. I don't care. You could be swearing at me and threatening to eat me. I'm still getting what? Attention. Here is a list. It's been 2 years of other topics I speak on. Take them anytime. You'll notice on here, phone number. I mentioned this when we did the virtual. I never charge for phone calls. Yes, and some parents have called me. Ask me a question. I have no problem. You want research? You have a specific question? I'll answer it. I love what I do. I have fun. Call me. I'll answer your question. Just remember, if you're getting especially detailed, you might have to come in because it's like calling a mechanic and say, my car does this. What does it mean? If you call the mechanic and say, how often should you change your oil? He could probably answer that. But if you want very specific, I'm just warning you, I may say, I don't know until I see your kid. But I have no problem giving you 5-10 minutes. Just call. I'll answer any question I can, including additional references if you want. Anything in here helpful? Then let me warn you about something. It's 8:15 at night, and you're still here. I doubt any of you have parenting issues. I guarantee all of you think you do. I never worry about the ones who come here. I worry about the ones who don't. So be nice to you, please. And I'll tell you one last joke. Physics, atoms, A-T-O-M-S. Why can't you trust atoms? They make up everything. Good night. Thank you very much for having me up.